variance. February balanced budget variance. So when I do financials, I tend to use row or columns equals something pretty often. So how are we going to use this? I actually have a file that I like to use, so we're going to pull that up. Here it is. We'll talk about expanded multi-replicator here. Grab that. Let me switch to my other data source real quick so I can work on that. So what I have here is the exact same replicator. Rows, go to my customer table, bring me back the customer numbers that start with the number 0. This is just rows. I then created a rows equals 2 and I color coded it, and a rows equals 4. So I could come in here and say 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. And as I expand that, it grabs the entire pattern of this region. So I have rows equals 2, here's that customer, 1 and 2. This customer, 1 and 2. Or 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's the way it is with columns. I can build out months. I can combine them together to build really complex. Rows equals 1 with columns equals 4.
Did you send us this?
Yeah. Oh no. But here's what we're after. We're after something like this. I want a report that lists all the sales in the month of January grouped by date. And I want to see how many total sales occurred on each date. For each date, I want to see the document number, the total of the sale, and the salesperson who's responsible for it. So on January 7th, I had 10 transactions, and here they are. On January 10th, I only had 1 transaction. Here it is. 16th, I had 2. Here they are. So what is this actually showing? I've color-coded it here. We'll collapse this down, and here's what I've built. My primary value, this is the value that I want my other data segmented by. My primary value said, well, I want to see every date where a transaction occurred, and within each date, I want to see the transactions that occurred. So I say, okay, my posting date is going to be my primary value, that main grouping. I said, go to my sales invoice. I should go to the sales invoice header. I built this a while ago. Look at that posting date and bring me back a unique list of posting dates that occurred in January of 2016. I then have my primary detail. Our primary detail is anything that is relating to that primary value. How many transactions occurred on that date? If this was a customer number, what's the name of that customer? What's their contact? You know, things about that value. So that's really no different than what we've done up to this point. Here's where it gets a little bit different. I'm going to drop down 1 row. I'm going to build in another replicator here. Within this replicator, I'm only going to say rows, not rows equals 1. I guess I could put rows equals 1. But I'm just going to say rows. Go out to my sales invoice. I should still say header. I'm going to have to fix that. Go out to my sales invoice line and bring me back all the documents that you find. And I'm going to relate this, if we look, instead of looking at my date up here, I'm saying give me all the documents that occurred on my primary value. And then I have my secondary detail. What was the amount of that document? What was the salesperson on that document? So in my primary value, I start with the rows equals 4, typically by default. And the reason for that is I need a row for my primary value. I need a row for my secondary value. And then I'm going to leave a spot for my secondary anchor row and a spot for that subtotal. Right? Because as I've got this report right now, it probably would be nice to know, well, what is the sum of all these transactions? Right? So I need to leave a space for that anchor row and a place for that total. So I'm going to go ahead and add that in there. Subtotal. There we go. Subtotal equals sum, and I grab that replicator that I want to sum up plus the anchor row beneath it. Okay. But I said the anchor row is any row beneath a replicated region, which means I have a second anchor row right here, right? My primary value, or my primary replicator, is these 4 rows. So I'm going to leave a spot for my secondary, or my primary anchor, and this way I can have a report total. And I'm going to grab the replicator all the way through the anchor row. And I'm sure most of you see a problem with this right now. I run it, and it's doubling my totals. I'm expecting about 452, I'm getting 904. Because what's happening is it's summing up all those values. So there's 2 ways we can handle this. I'm sure most of you Excel gurus know a better way than just going, well, I'm going to just divide that by 2. If it's doubling it, I'm going to divide it by 2. It's a bad way of doing it. There's 2 reasons for that. One, somebody's going to click on that and say, why are you dividing my totals by 2? This is my money. Don't divide it by 2. The second reason is, as I build multi-level groupings, sometimes I'm going to have to divide by 2, sometimes I'm going to have to divide by 4, and I'm going to have to keep track of that in my brain. I don't want to have to do that. So I get in the habit, and always do, I use the subtotal function. Check out number 9, grab that value and that anchor row. And if I do the same thing here, subtotal number 9, because I want to get a sum of values, grab that replicator all the way through the anchor row. And now I get my correct totals, except I switched the sign on my value here. And for those of you that don't know why this works, even though it's selecting all these cells, subtotals ignore other subtotals. So I pretty much never use the sum function or auto sum. I just, out of habit, SUBT tab 9, comma, grab my values. I think that's a better way of going about doing it. Some people still prefer, I want to divide. It's your prerogative. But it's not the most efficient way of doing things. So that's what we're going to build. The process that we need to understand is in page 4-5. The first thing we need to do is identify what our primary list value is going to be. These are the values that we want to see the data segmented by. And we're always going to use an expanded region. Maybe if you don't need the subtotals, you do a rows equals 2. But most of the time you're going to start off with rows equals 4. Just start with that and then whittle it down if you don't need it. Okay. And then we're going to place any of our data functions in that same row. Part 2 is identify that secondary list in detail. What is that data that we want segmented by that primary value? So this is the value that's going to reoccur for every value in our primary list. We're going to do basically a rows equals 1, essentially. Just a rows. We're going to drop down one row so that way we don't have rows in the same row. That's one of the main reasons we drop this down. And we always need to remember that on that secondary list, we need to filter on the value in that primary list. Right? Even if it's one of our filters in the top left corner, right, I need to say, okay, well, I'll grab the posting date, and I'll grab the document type from up there. But now I'm grouping this by salesperson, so I need to say, give me the document sold by that salesperson. So you're going to have one value, one filter at least going back to our primary list. And our expanded regions, okay, that same rule applies. If I apply those filters to my primary list, I typically am going to apply them to my secondary list. Right? I wouldn't just list all of my GL accounts and then show me all the transactions that occurred, because I might have 50 or so GL accounts that didn't have a transaction. Do I really want to see those? So we would want to make sure we're filtering properly. So let's actually walk through this whole process and go through it together. On page 4-6, I think this is the easiest way to do it, is we actually build this together and understand it. Janice and her good old commission report. She needs a report that lists all the customers who had a commissionable transaction in January 2008. The customers should be broken up by salesperson so that there can be a subtotal of the commissions for each salesperson and a grand total for all commissions paid during January. I need to be able to select which salespeople show on the report so I can run it for one, several, or all. Commissions are paid as a flat percentage of the transaction. So we need to identify our 4 parts of the list. We've already got our mock-up. We'll get to the next page and it's actually going to give us our filters and our tables, so we don't need to do all that. But what's our primary list going to be? Yeah, salespeople. Right? How about our primary list details according to our mock-up? Well, our primary list detail is information about our primary list value.
Oh, the name of the commission.
Yeah, the name, commission percent. Right? Give me the name of that salesperson code. Give me the commission percent associated with that salesperson code. What's our secondary list going to be all about?
Customer.
A list of our customers. And we're going to use our customer number for that. And so our secondary list detail,
Customer number, name, total commission, transactions.
yeah. To be honest, customer number shouldn't really be on there because that's really our secondary list. But our name, our total commissions of transactions, and our total commission that we pay out. I'm going to have to fix that. I think it fixed. So we've identified those 4 parts of a report. On page 4-7, we've got our filters. Right? Janice specifically said January of 2008, but chances are this is a commission report. She's not going to just pay commission one time. It's going to be a reoccurring event. So we're going to build a report filter for a posting date. She said she specifically wants to choose salespeople, whether it's one or all or just a couple of them. So we're going to build that as a report filter. And we know, if we think back to yesterday, we had to do a hard-coded filter of that document type because we need to only pull commissionable transactions, our invoices and our credit memos. In our customer ledger entry table, we deal with reminders, refunds, invoices, payments, credit memos, all kinds of stuff. So if we include all those, our numbers are going to be completely wrong. We've got our tables and fields. So let's actually build this report. Close this up. And we'll go through the process here. Okay? We want to follow the process. So our first thing is to create our option page, create our report page, hit report, go back into design. On our options, let's add our filters and our filter values. We have 3 filters: posting date, salesperson code, and document type. I've got my posting date, salesperson code, and document type. And we know our posting date was 01/01/08. She said she wanted to start with January 2008, so we'll make it nice for her. We don't know a salesperson, so we'll just do a star, but document type, invoice, type, credit memo. Once we have our options page set up, what's our next step? Yep, we'll grab our titles of our filters and copy them over to our report page. And then use cell references to grab the values from our option page. You're so close to using those.
So you say.
I think it wants us to do examples first, but I'm going to show you how we're going to use it before we jump into the examples, so that way you get practice doing that as well. All right. So we know our columns. Right? We've got our salesperson code and the salesperson name, commission percent, customer number, customer name, total commissionable, just total transactions. Just so we know, because if I were to look at that, I would say that's a count, but I'm going to put in dollars so we know. And total commission.